Have you ever done something out of compassion and the next day wondered if you shouldn't have? I have. And to this day, I don't know what I fed that night. It was late October 1998. The wind cut across the plain like a knife, and the silence outside was too heavy even for Boone, my dog, who always growled at everything. That week, an animal had been circling the house, thin, stumbling. It looked like a stray dog. I only saw it in glimpses near the fence. That night, I left a plate of meat and rice outside, not out of kindness, but to sleep in peace. I thought if the animal ate, it would leave. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of the plate scraping across the porch floor. I looked through the window and saw something. Too thin to be a dog, too tall to be a person. It moved slowly, like something in pain, and it stopped for an instant, facing the window. I swear it knew I was there. The next morning, the plate was clean, and I should have left it at that. My name is Daniel Reese. In 1998, I lived alone on a 3-acre property about 6 miles north of Gallup, New Mexico. I bought the land after my divorce to escape the city's commotion. The place was dry, even beautiful, but completely isolated. At night, the desert went black. No neighbor's light, no car noise, just the wind blowing between the rocks. My dog Boone was my only partner, an old, smart, mixed-breed shepherd. He used to bark at everything, even the echo of his own voice. That autumn, he stopped. He started to curl up on the porch when the sun went down. Sometimes he trembled, looking into the dark, without making a sound. The routine was always the same. I fixed old things, changed the truck's oil, drank strong coffee, and listened to the news on the radio. I considered myself immune to those stories the locals told, sightings, wolves that walk upright, shadows that talk. I always thought they were inventions of people who were too lonely. But that week, something changed. Boone wasn't eating properly. Every night I heard footsteps near the fence, light, uneven, a scratching sound like claws scraping the dry earth. I thought it was a coyote or a lost dog. I saw through the window cracks, a thin shadow marked ribs, walking crookedly. That first night, I felt pity. I put the leftover dinner meat in an aluminum plate and left it on the porch. Boone was restless, whining softly. I went back inside thinking I had done a good deed. It was just a hungry animal, I told myself. But what the desert has in beauty, it also has in strangeness. Things happen slowly there, and the silence guards everything you try to forget. The next morning, the plate was clean. So clean, it looked like there had never been food on it. And next to it, some small marks like fingers, 5, but too long. On the second night, Boone didn't want to leave the house. I kept calling him, patting my leg, and he just looked at the door, his tail tucked. It was strange. That dog would face even a coyote, but now he seemed to understand something I didn't see. I left another plate almost automatically. Meat scraps with a bone. It wasn't pity, it was curiosity. Part of me wanted to know if it would return. I stayed up late, sitting in the armchair, the radio on, just to have some human sound. Around 1 in the morning, I heard the plate scraping again. I looked through the window. The yard light only caught the packed dirt of the porch, but a shadow crossed the light. Tall, thin. For an instant, I thought it was a person. I stood up, moving closer to the glass. The figure crouched and started eating with its hands, not its mouth. Slow, somewhat clumsy movements. It looked like someone who no longer remembered how to do that. When Boone growled low, the thing stopped. It stood motionless, then it turned its face toward the window. I couldn't see clearly, only the eyes reflecting the light. Small, deep-set, shining wetly. I stood there, breathing slowly until I realized it was you watching me too. The sound that came next was a kind of hiss, like breathing through a stuffed nose. The thing rose up, much taller than I expected, and retreated into the dark. I didn't run. I closed the curtains and stayed quiet until the sun rose. In the morning, the plate was clean again, but there was something else, a piece of cloth, like a torn sleeve, caught on the fence. Thick fabric, with dry dirt and the smell of rust. I put the cloth in the shed and tried to forget, but Boone didn't forget. He spent the entire day staring at the window, his body tense, the hair on his back standing up. That night, when the sun went down, he started whining even before it got dark. That's when I understood. The animal wasn't just passing through, it was coming back. I spent the next day trying to pretend things were normal. I worked on the truck, listened to the news, washed the pots. Boone followed me through every room, always in silence. When the sun began to set, he tucked himself under the table, something he never did. I decided not to leave food outside anymore. If it was a wild dog, it would eventually leave when it found nothing. But around 11, I heard the noise again. This time, it wasn't the plate. It was the sound of the porch door rattling as if someone lightly touched it, testing it. I grabbed the flashlight and went to the living room. The light swept the window glass, and for an instant I saw a face. I don't know if I can call it a face. It was too fast, just the impression of two deep-set eyes and the outline of something that seemed too thin. When the flashlight flickered, there was nothing there. Boone started to growl, low, his chest puffing. That's when I noticed the noise was coming from the back of the house, not the front, as if the thing had circled around. I went out the back door with the flashlight and an iron pipe. The air was still, and the desert made a kind of silence that hurt the ear. I walked slowly to the shed. The door was open. I remembered locking it. Inside, the smell of metal and meat. In the corner, the piece of cloth I had saved was gone. The sound came from behind me, light, quick. I swung the flashlight around. Nothing. But on the ground, in the dust, there were marks. Not footprints. Hands. The same 5 thin marks I saw next to the plate. And one of them, very clear, pressed against the wall, seemed fresher. I went back inside and locked all the doors. Boone didn't stop shaking all night. Outside, something was scratching the wood as if trying to remember the way. The next day I went to Gallup, more to breathe than out of necessity. I told myself I needed to buy groceries, but deep down I just wanted to hear human voices. The market cashier recognized me, asked if I was okay. I said yes, just the cold bothering me. But as I drove back, I felt that sensation of being followed. Every reflection in the rearview mirror looked darker than it should. When I got home, the fence gate was open. Boone was inside, but quiet, as if he had been placed there. He didn't growl, he didn't bark. On the porch, the aluminum plate, the one I hadn't left outside, was back, clean, right in the center. It was the first time I felt true fear. Not because of the creature, but because someone, or something, understood what I was doing and imitated it. I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to find explanations. A neighbor playing a trick? Some vagrant living in the vicinity? Everything seemed possible, until I realized there were no human footprints around the house. Only those thin marks like fingers. I grabbed the shotgun and leaned it against the wall. I slept with it nearby, swearing that if it returned, I would settle it. Sometimes I think fear doesn't come from the unknown, but from what we know too well and pretend to forget. Loneliness does this. It teaches you to talk to the void, and the void sometimes answers. And if you've heard sounds or seen things you couldn't explain, stay with me here. Give a like, so I know I'm not the only one who went through something similar. That night, the wind changed, and the plate, which I had thrown in the trash, rattled on the porch again. I stayed awake late, sitting near the window with the light off, the shotgun in my lap, cold coffee in the mug, Boone lying at my feet, breathing fast. The wind came from the east, bringing the smell of the wet desert, that smell of earth, before the rain. Around midnight, I heard the gate creak. Then footsteps. They weren't hurried. It was the sound of someone who knew the way, who didn't need to search. The porch wood groaned. The shadow appeared at the window, long, tilted. I stayed motionless, holding my breath. Boone lifted his head but didn't bark. He just stared, his fur bristling. The sound that came next was the plate being dragged again, a metallic noise that seemed to last an eternity. I looked slowly through the gap. The body was thin, covered in dirt, but the movements, they weren't those of an animal. It was as if someone was trying to remember how a body works. The hands were visible now, bony, the fingers long, the skin thick, marked by scratches. And when that thing bent down, I saw the face, or what was left of one. For a second, I thought about shooting, but Boone started to cry, low, as if begging me not to do it. The creature turned its head toward him, and it spoke. The voice came out fractured, hoarse, almost soundless. "Boone!" The dog flinched, trembling. I froze. No one but me called my dog by that name. The thing stayed there, motionless, as if waiting for a response. And then it moved away, walking backward, until it disappeared into the dark. When I left the house with the flashlight, I found nothing, only the plate, clean once more. And next to it, a bone, not an animal's. Small, white, still with teeth marks. I went back inside without saying a word. Boone didn't sleep again that night. Neither did I. The next morning, Boone was gone. His chain was still attached to the porch pillar, unlatched, as if someone had calmly undone the clasp. No sign of a struggle. No blood, no footprints. Only the plate, again, placed next to the water bowl. I spent the entire day searching. I walked to the edge of the property, shouting his name, the echo dying in the wind. When I returned, voiceless, I saw the same hand marks imprinted in the shed dust, now doubled. 2 rows, small, going and coming back. That night, I slept with the shotgun, resting on my chest. I woke up to a noise in the yard. I didn't go to the window, I lay there, listening. First, the plate, then the sound of something chewing, wet, uneven, and finally, a breath, slow, close. The floorboards creaked right next to the bed. The air grew heavy, cold. I smelled wet earth and old iron. I closed my eyes and waited for the sound to stop. When dawn broke, Boone was back, sitting on the porch, dirty, trembling, with deep-set eyes. He didn't look at me properly. The fur on his neck was ripped out, and in his mouth there was a bone, the same type of bone that appeared the night before. It took me days to understand, or to accept. Someone or something was using the dog to get to me, and when Boone disappeared, he wasn't hunted, he was fed. That afternoon, I met an old man from the reservation selling firewood on the road. I showed him the bone. He looked at me for a long time and said only one sentence: "If you give it food, it returns." I drove back home in silence. I threw away the plate, the bowl, the chain. But that night, before falling asleep, I heard the metallic sound again, the plate hitting the floor, softly, 3 times, like a reminder. And I understood, whatever it wasn't coming for food anymore. It was coming to see if I remembered. It's been over 20 years. I never went back to that house. I sold the land for almost nothing and went to live near my brother in Albuquerque. I still have Boone, or what's left of him. The vet says he aged faster than normal, but sometimes, when I see him sleeping, I still hear him whine like that night. I never told this whole story to anyone. People don't believe in something that has no shape. They prefer to think we went crazy, that the desert messes with your head. Maybe it does. But there are nights when the wind changes direction and brings a distant metallic sound, like a plate slowly hitting the floor. And I remember the face at the window, my dog's name coming from the mouth of something else. I don't know what it was, maybe I never will, but I learned one simple thing. Hunger isn't just for food. Sometimes what comes back to seek is what we let die inside ourselves. If this story captivated you, leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Sometimes what is most frightening is what we wanted to help.